Okay, so kind of heading towards the end of Romeo and Juliet, ramping this last play up. Um, one of the moments I want to kind of jump to um, is when Juliet goes to Friar Lawrence at this point. So now the crucial thing is that having lost Romeo has lost Mercutio, because he's dead, and Juliet has lost the nurse because the nurse is like, you're married to Romeo, but he's banished, marry this other guy, and she can't believe that that's the. She goes to the nurse for comfort and advice, and the nurse is like, just be married to two guys at the same time, and I know you love Romeo, but this guy's, he's good looking, marry this guy. So that terrible fucking advice that which completely, she's very unsympathetic to how Juliet must be feeling right now, means that she's fucking useless. And she's been a character that we've liked. The nurse is a pretty entertaining, fun, audience favorite character. Like Mercutio, the nurse is very grounded, down to earth. But with now that she's too down to earth, she's like Mercutio. We like that they're down to earth, but neither Mercutio nor the nurse understand love at all, like the power of it, the spiritual value of it, the transformative effect of it. They just don't take it seriously. They're just like, fuck some people. Yeah, I lost. I'm sorry you lost that fuckboy. Get another fuckboy. It's not great. Um, so Juliet, she's very furious with the nurse. On top of page 22, she doesn't. She says, "Go, counselor." Right. Um, Thou and my bosom henceforth shall be twain. We're going to part it. I'll to the friar to know his remedy. If all else fails, myself have power to die. Um, so Juliet shows up, um, and Friar Lawrence talks to her, and she says to shut the door. Um, oh, Juliet, I already know thy grief, because Paris, the guy she's supposed to marry, has come to the friar saying, "Okay, friar, we're going to get married. You should marry me and Juliet." And of course, the friar already married Juliet to Romeo, so he sees the problem. But nobody knows she's married to Romeo. And he tries to say, he says, "I already know thy grief. It strains me past the compass of my wits." Right? I mean, it's breaking my brain here. I hear thou must, and nothing may prorogue it, on Thursday next be married to this County Paris is like his name, title. She says, "Tell me not, friar, that thou hearest of this, unless thou tell me how I may prevent it. If in thy wisdom thou canst give no help, do thou but call my resolution wise, and with this knife I'll help it presently." So she pulls out a knife. She's ready to stab herself right there if he doesn't have a solution to this problem. "God joined my heart and Romeo's. Thou sealed, thou our hands. And ere this hand, by thee to Romeo sealed, shall be the label to another deed, or my true heart with treacherous revolt turn to another, and this shall slay them both. Therefore, out of thy long experienced time, give me some present counsel. Or, behold, twixt my extremes and me this bloody knife shall play the umpire, arbitrating that which the commission of thy years and art could to no issue of true honor bring. Be not so long to speak. I long to die." Claire Danes does a fantastic job with that line. She puts the gun to her head and says, "I long to die. Um, if what thou speaks is not of remedy." He says, "Hold, daughter, I spy a kind of hope which craves a desperate execution." And that's when he tells her about the potion that'll fake her own death. So, for folks who think that it's Friar Lawrence, all of this is Friar Lawrence's fault, it's worth pointing out that the only reason Friar Lawrence has this idea about faking your own death is because Juliet shows up and is like, Romeo is banished on pain of death, never to return. Um, and her father is forcing her to marry someone else, which means he's forcing her to be untrue to Romeo. And she is ready to kill herself right then and there in front of Friar Lawrence. So while Friar Lawrence's death potion, faking your death potion thing may be a big part of the problem, Juliet kind of forces him into it because she's literally standing there being like, "You tell me something to fix this or I'm going to stab myself in the heart right now." Um, this is also one of those moments that I think it is very typical to kind of make fun of Juliet for being way too extreme. But I don't know. I admire her passion. She's a fictional character. Obviously, don't kill yourself. Um, but in this story, for a fictional character, I admire her sort of. She's so committed She's so it's an extreme thing to do and to say, but there's something that is, I find, in a twisted, fucked up way admirable. In the same twisted, fucked up way that I find Macbeth and Coriolanus admirable. These characters go to extremes, and while you and I, in real life, probably don't need those extremes, in a story, it's fascinating to watch characters go out to the edges, to go out to the extremes, to do the crazy things that we think of doing but don't actually do. Um, because it's fun to mentally think about this sort of these extreme areas, and poetry is one of those things that delivers that to us. We can't get to that in our normal lives. Very few of us will be faced with the kinds of issues that Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth and Coriolanus face. We have small scale versions of the same things. We have temptations, we have love, we have frustrations with our democratic populists voting for people that I would really rather they didn't fucking vote for. Um, but the extremes the characters go to, it's a way of widening your consciousness. It enlarges your soul to think about these more extreme issues. And I think I guess my point is that people think the extremity makes the play kind of bad, but I think the extremity is exactly what makes the play good. It's what makes it valuable. I want my fiction to take me out to some extremes because I'm not going to be able to get there on my own. I'm not going to be doing these extreme. I'm not going to murder my king. But I would like to see someone think it through in this way. All right, so she's kind of intense, and Juliet goes for this sort of faking your own death idea. Okay, cool. So while Juliet is coming up with this whole faking your own death thing, Romeo is banished, and we pick up Romeo at the top of Act 5, and he is banished. My students often find banishment baffling, because he's essentially been kicked out of the city. So whatever, go live somewhere else, meet somebody else. Now, obviously, if you're in love, you feel like there's only one person for you. That's the idea of soulmates. So he can't really do that. But the movie does a pretty good job of Romeo's like in a trailer in the desert. You have to understand that banishment in these days, being banished out of your city is like being banished out of your civilization. It's not like moving from New York to Cincinnati. It's like moving from New York to the jungles of South America, or the desert. In the Middle East, like you are in the middle of you don't speak the language, you don't know the customs, this is not your culture, these are not your people. You're really left out in the middle of nowhere, banishment. So it is a pretty extreme thing to happen to you. Okay, cool. So Romeo gets some mistaken information. Now in the movie, what happens is that FedEx just misses him, and they deliver a letter, and they say, "Oops, sorry, we missed you." In the play, it's slightly more interesting. I'm not actually going to go to the part of the play that talks about it because I just don't think it's that interesting. But I'm going to say it to you just out loud now, which is that what happens is Friar Lawrence gives the letter to another monk, and before the monk can travel with the letter, he goes to the house of sick people, which is something that priests and monks do, and they go visit dying and sick people. And when the monk goes to visit these dying sick people on his way to Romeo with the letter, it turns out they got like the plague. And then the monk gets put under quarantine, and he can't leave the house because they don't want to spread the plague, and that's why the letter doesn't get to Romeo. It's not an especially interesting thing. It's just worth pointing out this semester, while we're all quarantined during the plague, that Shakespeare's reason why the letter about Juliet faking her death doesn't get to Romeo is because Friar Lawrence gave it to a monk who was visiting sick people who had the plague, and then he got quarantined with those people and wasn't allowed to leave the house for like weeks, and so the letter doesn't get there. What does get to Romeo is somebody says, "Oh shit, I saw Juliet's funeral." And so Romeo goes, "Oh my God, she's dead." And he doesn't know that she's faking her death. But it's just teaching Romeo and Juliet in a time of a quarantine pandemic. It's very entertaining to me that the reason the letter doesn't get to Romeo in the script is because of the plague. Okay, I'll pick it up in the next video. Bye.